Dear learners, welcome. Today we shall discuss the concept of ideology. As you know that ideology is not a simple concept to discuss in a single lecture. So I have decided to record multiple lectures on ideology. There are various thinkers of ideology who tried to theorize it in their various works. The major thinkers of ideology are Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And in this series of lectures, today we shall focus on the insights of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, that what do they state about the concept of ideology. Although the Enlightenment thinkers of the French Revolution played a major role in inventing the modern notion of ideology, it was Marxism which developed it into a complete theory. Peter Singer observes that we are not free to live because we do not control our own society. Economic relations among human beings determine not only our wages and our prospects of finding work, but also our politics, our religion, and our ideas. Thus, it was Marxism which starts to identify that there is some system of ideas which dominates to the actions of a human being. Terry Gilton remarks that it is not possible to stick to a single definition of ideology. There are numerous definitions of it, which he discusses in his famous book Ideology and Introduction. He lists 16 definitions of it. The main are the process of production of meanings, signs, and values in social life, ideas which help to legitimate a dominant political power, false ideas which help to legitimate a dominant political power, systematically distorted communication, that which offers a position for a subject, forms of thought motivated by social interests, the conjuncture of discourse and power, the confusion of linguistic and phenomenal reality, the process whereby social life is converted to a natural reality, etc. So there is no single definition of ideology. We find numerous definitions of ideology, and it demands a serious exercise to explore the idea what ideology is. David Hawkes, in his book Ideology, writes, the market economy produces a systematically false consciousness and ideology. Thus, ideology is a vast concept with a number of definitions, although today it has been contributed by many other thinkers, but Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels are the primary and major contributors. Marx and Engels have contributed significantly as pioneers to the theory of ideology. Marx's important book related with it is Capital, Volume 1, and Engels' Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy. They have also written two important works jointly, The German Ideology in 1932 and The Communist Manifesto in 1848. Their point of departure is to relate philosophy and ideas with the given historical materialistic environment. Criticizing Feuerbach, a German philosopher, and others, they write that it has not occurred to any one of these philosophers to inquire into the connection of their criticism with their own materialistic surroundings. They add that philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. They hold that our ideas or thoughts are shaped by the base, the material conditions of production. In fact, Marxist philosophy rests on the base and superstructure relationship. They write that the production of ideas, of conceptions, of consciousness is at first directly interwoven with the material activity and the material intercourse of men, the language of the real life. Ideas alone are not enough to change the conditions of living, but a revolutionary materialistic practice is required because it is not consciousness that determines life, but life that determines consciousness. The forces and relations of production from the base upon which rests the superstructure which comprises law, politics, religion, art, ideology, etc. Superstructure includes the apparatus for the production of ideology. The function of ideology is to legitimate the power of ruling class in our society, because the ideas of the ruling class are the in every epoch the ruling ideas. It has been written by Terry Galton in his Marxism and Literary Criticism. Marx studies history as a materialistic process. Elaborating his materialistic conception of history, he writes in his German Ideology. He states that materialistic conception of history relies on expounding the real process of production of life itself and comprehending the form of intercourse connected with and created by this mode of production, that is civil society in its various stages as the state, and explaining how all the different theoretical products and forms of consciousness, religion, philosophy, morality, etc., arise from it, and tracing the process of their formation from that basis. Thus, the whole thing can, of course, be depicted in its totality, and therefore, to the reciprocal action of those various sides on one another. It has not, like the idealist view of history, to look for a category in every period, but remains constantly on the real ground of history. It does not explain practice from the idea, but explains the formation of ideas from material practice. And accordingly, it comes to the conclusion that all forms and products of consciousness cannot be dissolved by mental criticism, by resolution into self-consciousness, or transformation into apparitions, spectres, whimsies, etc., but only by the practical overthrow of the actual social relations which give rise to this ideal humbug, that not criticism but revolution is the driving force of history, also of religion, of philosophy, and all other kinds of theory. Literature for Marx is part of society's ideology. It means literary writings are not mysteriously inspired but materially produced and implicated in the world. To understand a text and its ideology, we must analyze the precise relations between different classes in society. And to do that means grasping where those classes stand in relation to the mode of production. However, the Marxism view of literature does not consider it merely as part of the superstructure, as a mere reflection of the base, but also as an active element that impacts history and the base also. Thus, literature can play an ambivalent role. It can perpetuate the dominant ideology, but at the same time, it can also contest that very ideology. Luke Frater notes that Marxism suggests to the people a way to govern their own lives. They must come to recognize the ideologies in which they live in capitalist society misrepresent the reality of that society, so as to be able to change the system of relations of which it consists. Talking about philosophy, in Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy, Friedrich Engels writes that the great basic question of all philosophy, and especially of more recent philosophy, is that concerning the relation of thinking and being. Similarly, Marx and Engels in the German ideology state that consciousness can never be anything else than conscious being, and being of men in their actual life process. Commenting on the relation between agency and history, Marx states, men make their own history, but they do not make it just as they please. They do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves, but under circumstances directly encountered, given, and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all the dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brain of the living. However, ideology changes with time and materialist conditions. When people speak of ideas that revolutionize society, they do but express the fact that within the old society, the elements of a new one have been created, and that the dissolution of the old ideas keep pace with the dissolution of the conditions of existence. David Hawkes notes that there are three main elements in Marx's theory of ideology: the idolatry of human activity, the mistaking of the sign for the thing, and the conversion of relations into fixed concepts. Understanding the operations of ideology becomes necessary, therefore, if we are to be free in real sense. In Ludwig Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy, Engels evaluates the traditional idealistic philosophy of Feuerbach and his friends and proposes new ways for practicing philosophy in the context of the conditions of living. Rejecting the old materialism, he writes, the old materialism becomes untrue to itself because it takes the ideal motive forces which operate there as final causes instead of investigating what is behind them, what are the motive forces of these motive forces. He states that all political struggles are class struggles. Talking about ideas and ideology, he observes that the state and public law are determined by economic relations. So, too, of course, is private law, which indeed is, in a sense, only sanctions the existing economic relations between individuals which are normal in the given circumstances. He observes that the first and major ideological power over mankind is the state. The state is the invention of society to safeguard the common interests and provides it the authority to rule over themselves. But, unfortunately, after its birth, the state makes itself independent and becomes a tool of the capitalist class, and so helps to perpetuate the rule of that class over the masses. He further writes that still higher ideologies, that is, such as are still further removed from the material economic base, take the form of philosophy and religion. Here the connection between ideas and their materialistic conditions of existence becomes more and more complicated and more obscured by the intermediate links. So, thus Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, they try to theorize the concept of ideology, and they try to give their insights to understand this system of ideas. Thank you.